the first place I lived with was more like a boarder. Like I had my own room and you know, we had dinner with the family, but it was not quite as immersive as the second family that I lived with. The second family I lived with was in Quetzaltenango, and me and my friend, both with two of us, a friend that I had met traveling, we both lived with the same family, and I had this like room off of the like the middle, like the way, I can't even think of the name of it, but like the exterior, like the atrium, which was open. I had like a little tiny room, and I had a straw bed, and it was so uncomfortable. But I remember when I first got there, I was like, fucking man, I'm paying these people to be in this small little room, and it's, you know what I mean? Like, and then something clicked, man. I was like, dude, you wanted to have an experience. You wanted to have this immersion of experience, and these people are opening their home to you. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I'm lucky.
Welcome to the Weekly Transit. Interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. There's nothing more fascinating to me about this earth than the people who inhabit it. My mission is to create deep, vulnerable, and open conversations that invite our unique guests to share the arc of their ever-evolving journey through life, in the hope that their stories inspire and resonate with you, our listeners. I'm your host, Scott Tejerian. Welcome to the Weekly Transit. I am here with my good friend, the amazing Jeffrey Newman. He is a artist, as you can see from his background, but also an actor, a writer, a pugilist. He's a man of many skills and gifts, as is indicative from his ascendant in Gemini, which is the twins. So, you know, when you're born with the rising sign in Gemini, it's like your personality has like a duality to it or a multiplicity to it. It's like some people know you as the artist, Jeff. Some people know you as the actor, the writer, the boxer, you know. So Taurus moon and a Taurus sun, those are the signs that represent the material, and you are very deep in the material. You're always covered in paint. So welcome to the Weekly Transit, Jeff. It's so great to have you here. How are you?
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I'm doing well. I just got over the COVID had COVID like last week.
Oh,
so
no. Okay.
I'm free flowing. I'm starting to feel, definitely better and better every day. So,
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. Okay. I'm sorry to hear that. There's a little more rasp to your voice, a little more graveliness than normal, but it's something that we hear often when somebody has one of the primal triad, the sun, the moon, or the rising sign in Taurus. You're, as we said, a sun and moon in Taurus. I'm a Taurus rising. We both have that that raspy, gravelly, sort of earthy tone, which, like the bull, like if you've ever heard a bull bellow, it sounds like raspy. So,
I never knew that. That's interesting. It used to be raspier when I used to smoke cigarettes.
Yes.
We're going back decades.
Yes.
But I was like, after a long night of drinking and smoking cigarettes, I sounded like Froggy.
Yeah.
I'd be down here.
Well, let's go back. Take us back in time. Like, you have such an interesting story, such an inspiring story. You are an inspiration to me. I've known Jeff for, I don't know, over 10 years, definitely, maybe 15 or so, maybe, probably, I don't know, maybe 15. Even longer. Yeah. 15 years.
Maybe close, at least 15, maybe longer, but yeah.
Jeff's studio is in the same building as the yoga studio that I used to go to at least 3 to 5 times a week. I lived in the neighborhood. So Jeff and I met at the yoga classes, the yoga studio, and, you know, being so close in the neighborhood, Jeff would come over to my house. I'd go over to Jeff's house. We hang out, have long, rambling Taurus visits. That's another
Philosophical.
indication. Yes. Taurus just kind of rambles like the bull, just meandering all over the field. And
Yeah,
that's us with
exactly.
our conversation. So, but I want to focus on you and your story and where you come from. Where'd you start and how'd you end up where you are?
Okay. Where did I start? I started back east, the Northeast, and right outside of Philly is where I grew up and was born and raised.
Where
And I
outside of
left.
Philly? Where
It's called
exactly?
Upper Darby.
Upper Darby. Okay,
Upper
cool.
Darby.
Yeah.
Now referred to as, I guess in the past 15 years, it's been referred to as, well, it's Delaware County is the county, but they call it Delco now.
Huh.
So, Delco, and you got that
Delaware
nice
County.
Philly,
Yeah.
Delaware County. They call it Delco over there,
Delco.
over there in Delco, where you got all your water and yo, what's up? How are you, Nooms?
Was this like a small town outside of Philly, or was it more?
No, it's one of the largest. It was at one point when I grew up. It was the largest township in the country.
What does that mean? Township. What is that?
I'm not sure what a township how it breaks down, but like Reagan came and spoke at our high school.
Oh wow!
When I was a junior, I think. Yeah, we had Secret Service. Reagan spoke there. It was I mean, my graduating class was like 800. So we had three. So this was
big class.
This was back big class. Yeah, and this was back in the where 80s, late 80s. 89 is when I graduated.
Oh wow! So, okay, that's cool. That's interesting.
Yeah. So a lot of change happening in the late 80s, early 90s. So I graduated high school, and then I went immediately. Like I knew I wanted to get out of where I grew up. I wanted to just I wanted to get away from everything that was. I wanted to write a new story to a large degree.
Okay.
And I went to Michigan State for a couple years, and partied pretty hard out of the gate. But I was actually I wanted what I wanted to do when I got out of high school was go into like military and be educated and educated through the military, but also become a lawyer, become it was grandiosity of like being a spy. I wanted to be like an FBI agent or a CIA. I wanted to learn how to kill, basically, is what I wanted to do. Wow. I was very much into role playing games in high school and all sorts of fantasy, not living my life kind of ideas. And I learned I found out very early in my college career that the military wasn't going to take me because I had physical problems. I had asthma as a child, and I had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, which was both of which were not really affecting me at the time, but I was looking at NROTC, which is the school branch of the Marines.
Yes.
And, because I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And they were like, well, I don't know if you'll be able to make it physically. So, maybe another time. So with that information, I downshifted into just getting into drugs.
So, okay. So I want to go down that path, but I just want to kind of reflect a little bit of my own story because it's really interesting. I don't think I knew that about you because when I was in high school, our NJROTC program was like one of the best in the country. Like our Captain John T. Nicholson he flew with John McCain in Vietnam, and he was the admiral or the captain of the USS Enterprise, this aircraft carrier. And when he retired, he started teaching at Sanger High School, this small little town out in Fresno County. And in 1986, I think they sent 9 kids from my high school to military academies. And Reagan sent Nicholson a letter thanking him for like his service and the great job in like training these young men and so on and so forth. So I had like similar aspirations. Like I was like, well, I'm in high school. Okay. Took ROTC. I loved Captain Nick. He was an amazing like mentor and just a really great guy and very thoughtful and well-spoken and just an inspiring individual. And I applied to get an ROTC scholarship, and I went to get a physical at Castle Air Force Base in the northern San Joaquin Valley, which is no longer there. And when I got back, Captain Nick told me, he's like, okay, so you've got the scholarship. They want to give you a scholarship, because I had the same fantasies as you. Like, I'm going to be an Air Force pilot, and then maybe I'll be like in the CIA or the FBI. I want to be James Bond. It's like totally indoctrinated by all these like Hollywood fantasies. And he's like, but there's one caveat. He's like, you told them that you had an asthma attack at the age of 13. I'm like, yes, because I had asthma too growing up. I had to go to the hospital in the middle of the night multiple times. I went to get, allergy shots like once a week and then twice a week for years. He's like, so they'll change it to 12. If you want to put down 12, then there's no... then there's no issue with that. But there is a cutoff. If you have an asthma attack at 13 or older, then you're not qualified. And it was kind of like a twofold thought process for me. I was like, well, I don't want to lie. That's not a good way to start. And I also just started thinking about all the running that I was going to have to do. And, with the asthma and stuff, like, I was like, I don't want to lie. I want to tell the truth. And he's like, I totally respect that. I understand. And so I didn't get the scholarship. So
wow.
And I just think about the difference my life would have been if I would have said, yeah, it happened when I was 12 instead of 13. Like, I would have been on a completely different path. Like,
way different trajectory.
Oh my God.
But you're regimented like me. Like I like when I find a regiment, I can stick to it.
Yeah.
It's like it's been years of like learning how to like be more with the flow versus like, no, it's not this way,
And that is our Taurus reflection, because Taurus is the bull. It's very staid, very steady. The Taurus represents routine. So like when we're in that routine, we just need to find that healthy routine that is going to support us in our daily life. Now, it was interesting also that you brought up that you wanted to travel and explore, and you wanted to be a part of these like law enforcement, upper echelon agencies. You were born with Jupiter in Sagittarius. Jupiter is the judge. It's in the Old Norse tradition, it's known as Thor. And Thor carries the hammer of the gods. Why? Because the gods know that Thor will be righteous with this great power. And so Jupiter is the Lord of Justice, the planet of luck and its expansion, and it's the planetary ruler of Sagittarius, which is the sign that it is in your chart. And it's in your 6th house, which means like for work, you want to do something expansive and righteous and something that's, that has that sort of higher frequency connection to spirituality or to a higher power, but also, travel and exploration. And that's your soul's purpose. Your North Node is in the 9th house, which is associated with the 9th sign, which is Sagittarius. So wanting to move away from home and experience something new was in the right frequency, and still is, for however you're navigating your life.
Interesting.
Yeah. But then you
Well,
did,
that
yeah. Go ahead.
well, so that didn't happen, obviously,
So
and
tell
I
me, what did happen?
well, I started getting like I joined a fraternity, and I mean that was happening already, and that's how I got hooked up with this NROTC guy. But then I kind of then immediately kind of gravitated towards some people in my fraternity who were a little bit more esoteric and a little bit more they partied more. They got into I started getting into marijuana and smoking weed and drinking more heavily, and then right at that same time my father passed away, which was a very big schism in my life. And I mean, it definitely shaped the trajectory of where I was going to some degree.
Tell me more. Tell me about that.
Well,
How old were you?
I was 19 when that happened.
Yeah.
And at one point, I wanted to use that as an excuse to not go back to school. But my mother, I think wisely was like, oh no, that's not an option. Like you're not staying here. You're going back to school. And that happened very quickly. When I got back home, I was like, well, she was talking about me going back, and I was like, well, I don't know if I want to go back. And she was like, no, you're not, there's not, that's not in the cards. There's no thing like that. So I went back to college and proceeded to just really, party my ass off. I did well in school while I was doing all of that, but I, then got into, hallucinogens and mushrooms and LSD. And that became all encompassing for a good year. Well, more than that, but I went to Michigan State for the next year and a half, and then ended up. My mom was moving, and some of the funds to go to college out of state were drying up. So I decided to transfer. She was moving to Florida, so I transferred my schooling to Florida State and resumed my partying. I mean, I think, and in hindsight, you know, I've been sober for a long time.
How long
coming
now?
Coming up on 27 in April, 27 years.
Wow.
But and through that time, through those 27 years, it became more clear to me that, at that time in my life, when I was in my early 20s and 19, it was, the drinking and the using was really a means to which to try to kill myself without taking the responsibility of pulling a trigger or jumping off a bridge, or something of that nature. I was just trying to find a way to not be here anymore, because I didn't understand. The whole living thing seems, I mean, it still to some degree seems complex and ridiculous.
How do you mean?
Well, I mean, I think that we are very simple creatures, and because of society, we've really managed to complicate our daily lives in such a way that is very stressful and unfortunate. Whether it's the bells and whistles that we live by, like the money, the property, and the prestige, and all of that. When I think in the core of it's about like what we talk about, but like getting down to the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty of like what we believe in life, versus this, just grabbing the shiniest tool and the shiniest this, and bling, like none of that. I think there's good things that money and property and prestige can afford you, but that's not where I think. I think about freedom of travel versus, governing, my popularity. I think that everybody wants to, maybe not everybody, but the idea of being validated by your peers is always attractive. But that's, I think as an artist, realizing that what I've made has made a difference in someone's life is what's really validating. Not so much that I'm being adored, but the fact that someone, whether it's somebody who relates to a painting or related to my show, or, you know, thought that I transcended a role that I was in a play, like when I can have a communication about how it's shaped their life or, you know, given them inspiration, that's what I find that removes the boundaries of like almost like we are one. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, we're both on the same track, and it's the only thing that's separating the two of us in a lot of ways is ego. You know what I mean? Like, because I think of the ego as the shell that wraps Jeff Newman. You know, your ego is the shell that wraps Scott. You know, and because I'm in, you know, a part of recovery community, and sometimes it gets villainized as like the ego, you got to kill the ego. And that's not my understanding. I have to get my ego right sized versus killing it. It's like, you know, because sometimes we come in, many addicts and alcoholics come into, or any other ism, whether it's gambling or, you know, food addiction. I would imagine sex addiction as well. It's like you have a distorted sense of self. So whether it's an inflated ego or a really small ego, they're both just one side, different sides of the same coin. And it's, you know, it's getting right sized. That like, oh, I'm no better than Scott and I'm no worse. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't deserve to be above him, but we are mere equals in this journey of life.
That's it.
And yeah, so like when I was drinking and using and in that kind of lower vibration, that's a very strange place, because you know, it's like you're a megalomaniac with an inferiority complex. You know what I mean? Like I'm the, you know, like I think I'm either the biggest, I'm the greatest, you know, druggie in the world, but I can't stand myself. You know what I mean? And if you knew who I truly was, you wouldn't be able to stand me either. You know, and that's why this kind of this death wish was what I was striving for.
Was that something that was brought on by the death of your father, or was it before that, and the death of the father was like the spark to that lit the house on fire? Like,
I always had that in me, because I've always had this existential crisis within me, from a very early age, when I was, you know, preteen to pre-teenage, like not feeling like I fit in to my family or to the world. And that's one of the reasons I think like things like the military or some sort of a mission gave me focus. Like, okay, that's something I can get behind. It's an ideology. It's like this, you know, there's right or wrong. And I'm sure if I would have gone down that path, I would have then been confronted by the dichotomy and the trappings of that particular organization, because the government and that definitely is not foolproof. You know what I mean? It has definitely a hypocrisy within it. I mean, I think life is hypocrisy, but the death of my father, I would say, took the lid off of a very combustible 2-liter bottle of soda. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they've been shaken up. Yeah.
It was shook it up, and like, you know, like it was just waiting for something to release that kind of pressure. And you know, so, and that's what it did. You know, it did that and I did that for a long time. When I was at Florida State, I had a lot of, you know, consequences and a lot of, you know, both mental and physical and freedom wise. You know, like I've been institutionalized a handful of times because of bipolar. I've been diagnosed as bipolar, whether I am or not, it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, I do take medication now, but it's more for me, it's less about, I gravitate more towards the depressive. these versus when I was in college, I was super manic, and doing all these drugs. They just would stimulate a mania that would then circle me into a psychosis that needed to be. I would just lose sense of reality. It's a very intoxicating place to be honest. Being manic. If you've never been manic, you don't know what you're missing.
What does that mean?
Well,
for you.
For me, when I was manic, it was like it was like 100% belief in self. Like I didn't have any doubts with, if I was wrong, I was the rightest wrong I could be. You know what I mean? Like, I thought I knew everything. I was super confident and, to a dangerous degree. I never got mixed up in my mania into something very too nefarious. I mean, I was dealing drugs at the time and stuff like that, but it never put me in harm's way in that way. But I certainly suffered from, I suffered the consequences of being arrested and stuff like that, but not in my mania. When I was manic, but it just gave me the confidence. It gave me an incredible amount of confidence, mania. And it's intoxicating.
But it wasn't founded in reality.
Well, it's born of reality, but then it eventually finds its own stratosphere. You know what I mean? It's born from reality, and then at some point in time, there's a tangential place of like, I'm talking to aliens, or you know what I mean? Like I'm not the son of God, but I'm related to Jesus. You know what I mean? Like he's my cousin, and we can bro down because I get it, and don't you see what I see? You know what I mean? So, but it's born from this place. It's not completely, well, at that point it is completely bizarre and bonkers, but it starts off in a place of, everything becomes some sort of like numbers begin to make so much more sense. And, not that numerology doesn't maybe have a place in the world, but, it's like, that is the end all be all, it's like almost like I guess I was never really a crystal meth addict, but like, finding, taking something apart, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of, you get in that same place of like, you don't understand, everything makes sense. Like the way that guy looked at me, and then the way she looked at me. And then when I heard that they were saying something, and then did you hear the bingo down the road? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, bro, like you're connecting dots that there's no longer any dots.
It's wild, I mean, so like in thinking about your chart, you were born with Saturn and the moon in the 12th house, and the 12th house is the house of the unconscious. And so Saturn is the planet of restriction, responsibility. It's the father, it's the authority. You have this strong restriction, but also the sense of reality to your fantasy. The moon in the 12th house, that indicates real emotional sensitivity to your unconscious, which can lead to maybe some of those highs and lows where you idealize the mother, but then also feel like you lose faith in the mother or the past or your family, where you've idealized them to a degree that's beyond what they actually were. And that makes the bottom drop out for you. But the unconscious is where we keep all of our psychological baggage, like the guilt, the shame, the regret, the blame, and the fantasy. And so you have the planet of reality in that house and the planet of the emotions in that house. And because of those placements, that can indicate a need to escape. Because the unconscious is associated with the 12th sign. So 12th house, 12th sign, that's Pisces. Pisces is symbolized by the fish. And we all know the phrase, drink like a fish. So Pisces, the 12th house, the unconscious, it rules drugs and alcohol, because you do have this very powerful unconscious sensitivity where you feel, you have this intuition about the people around you. It's what makes you such a compassionate individual. But it can be enough to carry the weight of your own pain and suffering, let alone the pain and suffering of everyone else. And so when you're carrying more than you should, it can create that urge to escape. And so I imagine, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like losing your father, that like opened up that powder keg, as you said, or the, shaking up the soda bottle. And so much came out that you had to escape from it and you went wild.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think there was still a place, my life would have been obviously very different if had my father lived, but I was still on a trajectory of where I was going. Maybe not as rapidly. Who knows if I would have gone as deep. But I was, because there was all those signs of wanting to escape were all parts of my my journey as a teenager, whether it be partying in high school or getting into poetry. And I mean, I was into, in high school, like pre-high school, pre-teens, I was like reading a lot about Edgar Cayce, and I was, I was enthralled by like astral projection, and drugs and alcohol kind of took the space in that realm for me. Like once I started to discover, drugs and alcohol, I was like, okay, this is the place where I want to be. And then without the, the father to govern and kind of keep me in check, it just was like, well, let me go explore even further. And I still had that, the sense of my father is never like, he was such a figure in my life growing up, and I didn't really we were very much alike, but we never really connected. That was part of a very, it was a lot. It was very difficult for me growing up because I wanted to connect with him and he wasn't able to. He had his own issues with himself and the world, and I don't think was able to. I think vulnerability was something that kind of killed him. He died at such a young age. I mean,
And it was sudden. It was unexpected.
Yeah, he had a heart attack when he was like 43 or 44.
Oh wow!
So I mean, I've already outlived my father by 10 years at this point in my life.
Yeah.
He didn't have any of, and it's like when I look back, because I know that you had a similar, without not having our fathers not around to have the ability of hindsight. Like I know that myself, like in my 30s and 40s, I was on a different trajectory than my father, but still it was a lot of reflecting into my youth. And, and I see other people's fathers. I see my uncle, you know what I mean? I saw him look into his past and have regret, my father died at such a young age that he didn't have time for any of that. He was still, I think, in that, first part of his life where it was like, I'm right no matter what. And I can't necessarily admit that I'm wrong, because if I am wrong, then part of the framework of where I am and who I am would fall apart. My father was a trial lawyer, and
oh wow,
and was his presence was a bit intimidating, in general. And, and he was very reserved when he had a good sense of humor, but he was, often more reserved than not, but he was a very theatrical attorney, apparently.
And what did he litigate?
He worked through corporate law. So big, huge corporations were, corporate law, not, so he would, deal with big companies and their take them taking other companies to trial.
But he worked for a company, or he would work for different corporations.
He worked for a company that's now like international and like a very big entertainment they're big in the corporations of the entertainment industry. And he was a partner. He was the head of the litigation department at the time. At a
Oh,
young
wow.
age, he became head of litigation at really like in his late 30s. You know, he was a very adept, I think is the word, attorney, and very, very smart, very, you know, had a lot of confidence.
Wow. I would love to get
Yeah.
the date, time, and place of his birth, and we could dive into
Yeah.
that. When's
I
his
know, I don't
birthday?
know if I know his birthday is April 21st,
Wow.
1940,
So,
1945.
so
But I don't know. I think he was born in Philly, but yeah, but he, like, I mean, we're
fellow
very,
Taurus. Fellow
yeah,
Taurus, yeah.
exactly.
April, you said April 21st, 1945?
Yeah.
Let me just look real quick and see if anything. April 21st, 1945. Just see where the moon was on that day. The moon was either in Leo or Virgo. So, Leo would mean that if the moon was in Leo when he was born, then he'd be very brash, very confident, like emotionally fulfilled by bold acts of courage. If he was a moon in Virgo, he'd be more detail oriented, maybe more critical, analytical. Does one jump out to you as more like him?
Seems like Leo would be more like my father, but
Yeah.
I'm not 100%.
Yeah. He was also like you, born with, so the two of you were born with the sun in Taurus, Venus and Mercury in Aries, and both of you were born with Mercury retrograde in Aries. So a lot of similarities between your astrological codes.
Right.
Yeah, with
I
those
mean,
three
we
planets.
were very much alike. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
was the thing, is we were so much alike we didn't get along. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Well,
I
two
was
two stubborn bulls.
exactly. We just,
And my dad
you
was
know.
a Taurus too, and we butted
Oh,
heads a
really?
lot as well because I'm a Taurus rising. He's a Taurus sun and moon, like you, my
Oh,
dad.
wow.
He died when he was 60, and I was 32.
Hmm.
So it was a little later than you
So
experienced. Yeah,
he had some time to kind of look over. It's like, you know,
yeah.
it's like that happens, I think, I know it happened for me, and I don't have any children, but you know what I mean? Like you look at your 30s and your 40s and you're like,
Mhm.
oh, I did make some missteps. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I mean, and that's one of the things, plus getting sober, which is another,
So that you got sober. That was you were 20, 27,
27, 27,
27.
28, just
Yeah.
shy of my 28th birthday.
Okay. And how
Um,
did that all come about? Like, what was so you're at Florida State, you're at Michigan State, partying your ass off. Florida State, partying your ass off. What happened after college for
well, in
four or
college, I did a
five
lot of,
years?
well, I was on, as I said to somebody the other day, I was on the 10-year bachelor's of science trajectory. So I was in college till 98.
Oh my
Um,
God! Wait, what? So you were at Florida
yeah,
State that whole time?
yeah. I was at Florida State from 1990 91 until
98.
97 98. Yeah,
Wow. And so and what fraternity were you in?
I was a Theta Chi.
Theta Chi. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I was a Fiji, and but
Fiji's and
they.
us got along great at Michigan State.
Oh, really?
That's where I
Okay.
went
Cool.
active. Yeah,
Yeah.
the other party house with Fiji's.
Yeah.
Fiji's were basically reminded you of like the Animal House. You know, we had they were way more out of control than us. We had a better GPA. Like
Oh.
we could pull it together, but those guys were out of control.
Theta
Fiji's.
Chi was our neighbor when I was there, but we had a guy in our fraternity who also was there for like 10 years. He was there before I got there, and he was there long after I left. So uh so it seems like there's one of those guys in every house,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you were hanging out, and you were still in college in 97, 98,
yeah.
and
I was
that's when
taking
you
Well, there was no, I didn't get, well, there was, when I was in college, I was told to stop drinking, and I had a brief stint of recovery, but it was never, I never, the battling of like my mental problems kind of like I self-medicated. Like people that are bipolar tend to self-medicate, so I wasn't willing to do anything different when I entered when I was part of any kind of recovery community. I wasn't willing to do any of the work that's kind of that I would say is required of someone to get their life on track.
Yeah, there has to be. You have to be a willing participant.
Yeah, you got to be a participant in your life, and I was still very much invested in being a victim of my circumstances.
And what was that victimhood? What did you feel like you were a victim? What were you upset? Like, your dad dying,
my father dying. You don't have, you know what I mean? Like I felt robbed of the privilege, that a lot of privilege actually, because I grew up middle to upper middle class, and I worked all through high school. Like I worked a lot to prove to my father that I didn't need him, but I was certainly willing to take all the benefits of him being in my life. You know what I mean? Like that was the way I could assert my autonomy from my father, and he respected it. You know what I mean? He respected that I worked since I was in like 6th grade. You know what I mean? I had a paper route for like 4 years, and then got a regular job, and then worked all through high school. And when I went to college, my father had told me, like, don't worry about making money. I got you. And I went to college. I was in college for 3 months, and then my dad died.
Yeah.
And the gravy train came to a halt. Wow. So I felt robbed of all of this, because my father also, he passed away at such a time that he didn't have his estate's stuff set up. He got caught in a donut hole. Like he had a bunch of estate stuff that he was rewriting when he passed away. Because I'm sure he didn't,
he didn't expect to die that young. Yeah.
43, 44, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That was not his, it was just shy of his 44th birthday. So I was the victim of my circumstances. You know what I mean? You don't understand, and angry, and so very angry at my father, and really angry at God, you know what I mean? Like at a higher power that because previous to my father, like I was very connected and I was very connected to my mom's father, who was my dad's best friend. And he passed away when I was like 12. And he gave my father the template to be a father, because my dad hated his parents. So we never saw his parents. When he passed away, my father he was not involved in my life. I mean, he was a workaholic. My dad was a workaholic. He just was like, everything was all about work. He could control it. He could invest in it, and he could excel. So when my grandfather passed away, he basically turned his back on me. And then when he died, then I was, it's
left alone.
It's a story of abandonment.
Yeah.
But circumstantial abandonment. You know what I mean? So who did I blame? I blamed God, because God's the one who took these people. Like my dad didn't abandon me so much as he died. Same with my grandfather. He didn't abandon me. He died. But the fragile psyche of a 12-year-old and the fragile psyche of a 19-year-old is like, they don't love me. I'm right. They don't care about me. You know what I mean? Like they're and then on top of that, my dad didn't have I then extrapolate like, well, my dad didn't even have the fortitude to like make sure that he was set up correctly,
right?
To take care of me and my sisters and my mother. He abandoned us even there too, financially, emotionally. This fucking asshole. You know what I mean? Like, and so for years, drank and used in that kind of, with that kind of vehement, venom that was underlay everything, you know what I mean? And
it was during that period where you were institutionalized
yes,
by
yeah.
your mom said
More, I was institutionalized by society versus my mom never actually pulled the trigger on institutionalizing me. It was usually the first time it was some friends of mine in college who went to the courts because I was just out of my mind a bit, and they were concerned for me. And then the second time I was concerned, I knew something was wrong. But I didn't. And then once I pulled the trigger, I wanted to undo the trick. Like once I set the ball in motion, I couldn't undo it. And I was like, oh, fuck, this isn't what I wanted. But it was what I needed. And then when I stopped drinking, out here, same thing. I knew something was happening. I knew, like, leading up to it, I didn't, because usually like the slow roll of like mania is like so intoxicating that you don't necessarily, it's like kind of like just it's kind of like drinking so much caffeine. You're just kind of like, oh, this feels great. Oh, I'm so good. I'm going to get so much done. And then, you know what I mean? And then days into that, you're like, wait a second, maybe this isn't Norse. You know what I mean? Like maybe this isn't natural. Well, I shouldn't have so much energy. I've only slept 3 hours. I haven't slept at all, and I just have more inspiration, don't you know? And, so usually we get to a place where I would recognize that something's not right. That like, oh, okay. Because there was a time after I stopped drinking, after I went to like a meditation course and was quiet for 10 days straight. When I came back from that Vipassana, when I came back from my first Vipassana, I felt manic, and that lasted, I wouldn't say like 2 or 3 days post Vipassana. And I knew that I was having these feelings of mania, and that if they continued, I would need to kind of be modulated or monitored. And, but they kind of dissipated in a natural way. Because that was, Vipassana is such a reset of your senses that when you come back into a city, you're so overstimulated. It's like Vegas. Like LA feels like Vegas. There's so much going on, and so yeah. So when I was my first what's considered what's called here is a 72-hour hold. I had 2 in Florida, and then I had 1 in Los Angeles.
So 2 in Florida, you were in college, and then did you graduate from Florida State?
Yes,
and then
I did.
You moved to Los Angeles.
I moved to LA and just after.
And right after that is when you had your third 72-hour hold.
Yep,
and
exactly.
It's like right when you moved to LA, and then that's when
it was about a month later.
Wow.
And part of, I was coming off of, when I was in Florida, just the last year and a half I was in Florida, I was in the legal system. The last 2 years, I was on house arrest and had probation and all of these legal problems that I had as a result of a drug charge, 2 drug charges, 2 drug charges and a DUI. And when I moved out here, I that was all gone, and I finished all of that. And but during that time, I was prescribed medication that I had to be on, that the court put me on because of my bipolar. And when I moved out here, I was running low. I ran out of that medicine. So I was like, oh, I'm not taking meds anymore. I'm done with that. And, started drinking a little bit. That was a mania that was probably triggered by just normal, exciting about being out of, having this new life, and maybe, taking the reins off of me from medication, because that happened early April of 98 was my last.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
This is wild because you're bringing up some dates right now. Like, I just want to kind of, segue, but then come back because I love this story. But you've just brought up 2 years that have a direct connection to 2025. And, you mentioned numerology. 2025, 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 5 is 9. 9 is the final single digit. So 9 represents endings. It represents endings and the wisdom that we receive from the lessons that we've learned from whatever is coming to a close, coming to a completion, a finish. And so you were born in a 9 year, 1971. 1980 was a 9 year. So you're a 9, 1980, 1989. That was another big year for you. You mentioned 98. Right. 2007, 2016, and now 2025. Do you see a thread for you in those years?
2007 was, I mean, it's that was I think that was kind of right after I got back from traveling. I got back from traveling in 2025 and 26.
2006
or 2006 and 07.
Yeah.
So that was a transitionary period of me getting back into Los Angeles and trying to figure out, kind of who I was again post travel, because I traveled for 7.5 months in my early 30s. And that was a huge learning curve, like a learning experience. So kind of coming to terms with that was 2007. And then 2016, I think some of that was kind of me like stepping into more of this journey of an artist, like just really, setting. I mean, I went back to waiting tables a little bit in 2019, but in 2016, I was like, oh, I can't do this anymore. I was like, I have to just kind of pursue, what I want to pursue and see where the money comes from. Wow. Versus, have some sort of a job that anchored me down. So,
wow. Okay.
And then this year is similar. I mean, I'm at a place coming into this year with like, again, like once again, I mean, I'm always going to be an artist. But I have no real grip on what the future holds for me. You know what I mean? Like I have a couple part-time jobs. There's one part-time job that's up in the air that I might actually be moving temporarily to a different state just to work for like a month and a half, and or not, like, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't know, like my show is kind of in a working state, the one person show that I did. I have this other project that I wrote with a friend of mine that's has some kind of life to it. So I just don't have any clue. I mean, when I think about the future, I'm like completely uncertain.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. That's your North Node, your soul's purpose is in the 9th house, which is the house of philosophy. It's, associated with the 9th sign, which is Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the archer. The archer is Robin Hood, Katniss Everdeen, freedom-loving individuals that don't want anyone to tell them where to go, how to think, what to say, what to do. They know the difference between right or wrong, and they want the freedom to explore far and wide so they can expand their minds, deepen their philosophical view, and speak their truth. And your North Node is in that house, but it's in the sign of Aquarius, which is that sort of detachment from the ego. It's not eliminating the ego, but it's putting the ego in check with the rest of society, the rest of community, that like nobody's better or worse than anyone else. We're all unique. We're all different. And it's about respecting one another's individuality. And so the more that you are logical and focused on uh, really the big picture of things, like in terms of, what is my role within the community? How am I contributing to the community or to the group, to the club, to the organization? And how is the group, the club, the organization, or the community, society, how are they contributing to me and my path? And that's the focus for you. But like when you think of that ninth house Sagittarius, like I just think of the symbol of Jupiter, which we talked about earlier. Yours is in a position of power because it's in the sign that it rules, Sagittarius, and Jupiter's a cross of matter with a crescent of receptivity pointed out. It looks like if you were to picture somebody jumping off of a ledge and then like the trail of their inertia coming off of the ledge and into oblivion or who knows where, but it's like having the faith. I'm taking this leap of faith. So the fact that you don't know about the future, think of that as a good thing, because you need to just take a leap of faith. It's about having faith in terms of what's next. Now, I do want to look something up for you real quick, because I want to see what your human design is, what it says about are you a specific or non-specific manifester? So I need to see if you're in my database here or not. Give me a second. So yeah, here you are. Okay. So yeah, you're like me. You're a projector, but you're a specific manifester. So, you need to be like, in taking, like, this is another one of our commonalities. We both waited tables for years. So, think about it like this, like in terms of faith, you need to be very specific about what it is you want. If somebody comes in to the 101 cafe and says, yeah, I'll have the eggs, well, okay. If you don't say how you want them, and you get them over easy instead of scrambled, and then you're bitching at the waiter because you didn't get the eggs the way that you wanted, it's like, well, you didn't say. I even tried to ask you, but you ignored me or you didn't say anything. So this is what I ordered. They're over easy. You wanted them scrambled. You needed to say, I want them scrambled. So you need to be very specific. Think of God or the universe, higher power, as your waiter, as your server. And you need to be very specific about what it is you want from the universe.
Okay.
The more specific you are, the more likely you're going to get what you want. You can't just leave it up to chance.
Mm.
But you have to have faith that when you order what you want, you're going to get what you want. You order those eggs scrambled, they're going to come scrambled and not over easy. But it's also about, even when it doesn't come back the way that you want, having faith that eventually they're going to get it right. They're going to get it right, rather than getting into that loop, that despair that tracks you back into the abandonment stage. Like, you know what? I was supposed to be set up in college. My dad was killing it in his job. And then he died and didn't leave, the right financial setup for the family. It's like, but you got to have faith that even if the food didn't come out the way that you wanted to, because like when you're serving somebody and you give them the food and it's not the way that they wanted it, like, and it wasn't their fault, it was like you put in the order wrong or they cooked it wrong or whatever. Oh, that gets under your skin. It's like, you don't want that. You want the food to be out right. Well, spirit guides, angels, God, they want to get it right with you too. But the thing is, it's like, if you have somebody coming into the restaurant every single week or every day, and every time they order the same thing. They come in so often, it's like, you don't even think. Like one of my like celebrity regulars when I worked at Wule Oak was what's his name? Oh my God. I got to look it up right now because, and that is okay. Okay. Because he's such a nice guy. Matt Reeves. You know Matt Reeves, the director, writer.
I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah. So like he would come in like every Friday night with his wife or his fiance, and then they got married. And I had them when they were fiancés and when they got married. Every Friday night, and he ordered the exact same thing. They two of them. He would order. I still remember his order. He would order the filet mignon. At the Wule Oak is like a Korean barbecue. He'd have the filet. I can't remember which she might have gotten a filet too. They get like a bowl of vegetable fried rice and he would have like a Diet Coke. If he ever came in on a Friday night and ordered the bulgogi instead of the filet, I probably wouldn't have heard him, and I would have just automatically entered in the filet because I'm not thinking, he always wants the filet. So I'm going to give him the filet. But he told me, no, I want bulgogi. It's like, oh God, I didn't hear it. Okay. So like you're going to tell the universe what you want, and it might be different than what you've been ordering before. And so the universe is going to be like, what, did we hear Jeff right? I'm not sure. Let's just give him the regular. Give him what he normally gets because, maybe we misheard him. Maybe he's confused. Give him the normal thing. So if you get that food and it's not yours, it's not what you ordered, do you eat it or do you send it back? You've got to send it back. So when you're in these situations again, you're like, no, this is not what I wanted this time. You've got to let the universe know this is not what I wanted. And what I want is this. So you say no, no, thank you, send it back and let them try again and have faith that the next time they're going to get it right.
That's the hard part, right? The faith.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's what you're here to learn. That's the muscle that you're exercising in this life, is learning how to have greater faith. And it's faith not only in the higher power, but also in yourself, that you're going to ask what you actually need and you're going to get what you need because you asked. Because, you might get stuck in that loop of like, well, what if I didn't do it right or I didn't say it right? It's just play it out, like we're acting out the scene here. We're feeling it out. It might work. We tried something or maybe it didn't work. And now we're going to make some adjustments and let's see if it works the next time. Get creative with it. But be logical in thinking about, okay, I said it this way and that, maybe how can I be more specific? It's like one of my friends who I grew up with, his father-in-law is a professor at Ohio State, and he's like a robotics professor. And I think like working with like AI and that sort of stuff, he's teaching these classes on just how to write code in a way that is very specific. So like one of the first assignments that he gives his students on day one is write down how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And he just follows their directions. And you would be shocked at how messy it gets because people aren't specific about what they were supposed to do. Like, they forget to say like, take off the lid and pull off the wrapper part, So he's just smashing the knife in through the wrapper and getting peanut butter all over the wrapper and it's a mess. Or, they might not even say to open up the peanut butter. And so he's stuck trying to, so you've got to really think about, what did I miss? Is there something else I could have included? Or
how minute?
Yes. Exactly. How minute? That's up to you to figure out.
Right.
So.
Well, the more specific, I mean, when I talk with people, it's like, the more specific you can get in dissecting your story to seeing how you got here, the better it's going to be for you to see where you want to get to next.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So what happened in 98? So you got sober in 98, you went to
I
rehab.
moved to no, I didn't go to rehab. I
No.
moved out to Los Angeles. I moved out to Los Angeles I got here on the Ides of March.
Uh-huh.
I got here on the Ides of March, actually. I remember that, which was
very dramatic.
very dramatic. I drove right to the ocean, and then I
What
stopped
ocean
drinking.
did you drive to? Like what beach? Santa
I
Monica?
think it was
Route
Santa Monica.
66, just straight
Yep.
to the pier?
Yep. Or I took the 10, right?
Yeah.
I took the 10. I remember just passing. I was like, well, I might as well just go here. And
Yeah.
I was, had my U-Haul truck and my car towing.
Yeah.
But so that was 98. I got here. I stopped drinking a month later, just under a month later, because I got about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks actually. It's not long. I stopped drinking on the 5th of April. And then, that took me and then on the, shortly thereafter, when I stopped drinking is when I had this next episode, kind of just like lost my marbles. And the rest of 98 took me building myself back. Cause usually, after a hypomanic episode, it takes a lot to kind of rebuild kind of rebuild the infrastructure of who you are and what you are. And because that's typically what happened with me is I would forget who I was. I would think that the last time I thought I was my unborn son, and I don't have a son, I was like screaming to talk to my father.
And this was like on the street you were doing this or something, or was
this was when I was at UCLA. Was I at UCLA at the time? Yeah, I was at UCLA. That's where I got Baker acted. I was in the emergency room at UCLA.
Well, how did you get there to begin with?
One of a friend of mine in recovery, that a newer friend that I had met, like I had mentioned to him, like, this is, I think he knew that he was somebody who had episodes as well, and he was like, look, we might need to take you to the hospital because like you're definitely erratic. And this was like it was on a Thursday. It was a Friday when he took me. But that Thursday, I was like, all right, okay, I'll go with you to the hospital tomorrow. And he was like, all right, we'll take you in the morning because that's when it'll be best to get into the ER, and they'll see what they can do for you. So he took me there. So I stayed at his house overnight in Bel Air, and then he drove me to UCLA in the morning. And I was 72. I had a 72-hour hold. I was there for about 4 days, I think, 3 or 4 days.
Wow.
At least 3 days.
And then you got out, and what were the steps to rebuild yourself?
Well, I was part of a recovery community that kind of helped out, kind of laid out some a spiritual program of kind of like, how to live my life, helped me basically claim responsibility for who I was. I mean, that's what, any of the 12 steps, any of the recovery programs will lay out for you, is that, you claim responsibility. Now, did I claim responsibility all right away? Did it all happen at once? No. Yeah. But I was working. I was trying to. My first job was at a bookstore. It was like I could all I could do to not be crazy. It took a long time. My first job was at a place. It was Ed DeBevick's in Bel Air or Beverly Hills.
That was your first restaurant job.
That was my first restaurant job in LA. Yeah.
Yep.
That was my first restaurant job, and I was hosting there. I had to host.
Were
you there? You had to be a host there before.
Were you there until it closed?
Yeah. I worked there. I worked that place. I worked at there, and I worked at the 101 at the same time. I had both jobs. They overlapped for about 6 months.
I was at the closing party for Ed DeBevick's, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
then
It
I
was
was
like a
probably there.
yeah. It was like a celebrity event or something, I think. And so,
I don't
yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
I
But
remember hooking up with a couple different waitresses that night.
so why did you come to Los Angeles?
Well, I came to Los Angeles. Strangely enough, I came to Los Angeles as a spot to. I was supposed to. I got into a graduate program in New York City that I had deferred because I was on house arrest when I got in, and I didn't want to move to New York on house arrest. So between, I had about 9 months, because I moved here at the beginning of the year, and then, or maybe 6 months. I have no idea. Like when I think back, like, why did I move to Los Angeles just to move back to New York? Because I moved here and I was going to be here for 6 months, but I brought everything I owned. You know what I mean? I drove here with everything I owned, a car and a bunch of furniture and bullshit like that. And then, what was the question again? Sorry.
Why did you move to LA?
Oh, so I moved to LA. It was going to be a jumping off spot, and I ended up, what was not on the radar at the time was, not getting sober. And, but I was pursuing writing and acting. So I was going to go to this, New York school for, acting, the New School for Social Research, which was, the actor studio program at the time.
Oh, wow.
So I got into that. That's where I was going to go to college or go to grad school.
Yeah.
And, circumstances dictated differently because I ended up deferring again, because you can defer for 2 years without reapplying, because I was newly sober. When it came to September, I was like, oh no, I can't, I'm just kind of getting my head out of my ass. I'm just starting to figure out, this whole thing. And then I waited another year. In that second year, I couldn't rationalize going into, thousands of dollars of debt without any kind of sure safety net at the end of it. Like I was already when I stopped drinking, I was already in debt, a couple grand, which felt like tens of thousands of dollars. And then, the idea of like going into, the new school wanted you to not work, so you would be, I would be on scholarship, or I was going to be on, not scholarship, but, financial aid. And I was just like, oh, getting out of college or getting out of grad school and owing like 60 grand. I couldn't, it gives me anxiety thinking about it now, so gratefully my school was paid for by my mother and my father. So I didn't have student loans.
Yeah.
That was, as little as I said my father provided for me, he provided that.
Yeah.
Which, as I've gotten older, I know is like a great
Huge
deal.
Huge.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
But you didn't want to add that graduate expense on. So that's why you ended up just staying in LA.
Yeah. Staying in LA and taking classes here and just, banging it out,
but you had aspirations to be an actor, and that's why you got into the new school. And then you came out you're like, okay, so I'm going to be in New York in 6 months. So, in the meantime, maybe I'll go to LA and see what happens there for me. And so,
I only knew like two people here. It's not like I had like some sort of a rich,
and you moved in 98 to LA.
Yeah.
That's when I moved to LA, was 1998. Yeah. Wow. Okay. And so since then you've been, obviously the waiting tables, we talked about that, but you have done acting and writing and the art and,
I've done some, I've been fortunate. I've worked as an actor on a few things, nothing. I was on Sons of Anarchy for a brief period of time, which was great. That's like probably my biggest thing that I've worked on. And I've had a couple commercials I've done, which were, great. And worked on a couple other things, but those are the biggest of note. And then, it's all encompassing. So when I think about it, it's like, it doesn't seem like much, but then I got into, and I went to some different, acting coaches and stuff like that. Most recently, over COVID. I mean, it's a long time, 20 years. Well, at one point in time, in the middle of my stay in Los Angeles, I went traveling because at one point in 2004, 2005, I just made a movie. I made a movie called The Untitled JC Project in 2000, at the beginning of 2004, which was a parody of the Passions of Christ, of the Christ.
Oh yeah.
Remember
I think
that?
you
You've
showed
seen
me
that.
that. Yeah. Yeah. You did. Yeah.
So I made that movie. I wrote and my friend directed it, and I starred in it, and I produced it. I executive produced it, and I didn't know that I didn't think I had any expectations when I made it. You know what I mean? Like it was a great idea. And it went off really well. We rented the silent movie theater, which was packed, a packed house at the silent movie theater for the
on
screening.
Fairfax.
Yep. Everybody loved it. It was very smart, and it was well received by the people that I brought. But unbeknownst to me, all I had was expectations. You know what I mean? Like somehow I thought that was going to be my shepherding into the next stage of my life. See, I made this movie, you know what I mean? Like I'm a good actor, or at least, in this style, and nothing happened, and I was extremely disappointed.
Yep.
And I thought to myself, like, maybe I don't want to be in Los Angeles anymore. Like maybe and one thing I had not done is I had never traveled at that point. And so I was like, fuck it. I was still working at the 101, or I was, early. I'd worked, opened the 101 in 2000. So I've been working there. I just stepped down as a manager, and I was like, fuck it, I'm going to go travel. So I got a plane ticket to I got a plane ticket in and out of Central America. Or did I don't even know if I had a ticket back yet. I bought a ticket to Central America.
Where?
I was going to go to Guatemala, is where I flew into.
Okay.
And then I traveled throughout the Central America, the Americas, for a little bit of time, and then flew into South America. And then spent another several months down there.
Where'd you fly into South America?
Colombia.
Where?
Because I lived in Bogota. Because I lived in Colombia for a couple months, more than I had originally expected. I taught at a school, Pina Verde, the Green Pine.
What were you doing there?
I taught English as a second language to like 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, or 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. So at like a small private school that my friend's daughter went to at the time. So I was there. I lived in Colombia for 3 months, and then picked up and started traveling again. Traveled the rest of. I went into Peru. I went into Ecuador for a minute, and then Bolivia, and then Argentina. I stayed in Argentina for about 3 weeks.
Where in Argentina?
Buenos Aires.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
It was so great
there.
Yeah,
I was there for 5 weeks in 2010.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to go back. That's
such a great city.
Such a great city. And it's laid out in such a, it makes sense. And it was, the people are great. The food was great.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it'd be interesting now to travel because I don't eat meat, but you know what I mean? But when I was there, I certainly had steak every night.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's the place to eat steak, man. South America, everywhere down there, they love beef. So I traveled 7.5 months in 2004, 5, and then came back, and like I wasn't sure. I mean, I sold all my stuff. I wasn't sure I was going to come back to the U.S. I was like, maybe I'm just going to travel and live abroad. But I mean, you find out that you need to make some money. That's the thing.
Uh-huh.
That's the rub. It's like, how am I going to make any money doing this as I travel? And I didn't really make any money traveling. Well, I mean, I made some money when I was teaching, but not enough. You know, I was making a local wage. And so that enabled me to live there for a little bit. And as I was traveling, all I could think about doing was coming back and making movies and writing and what I wanted to do. And so I decided to come back and restart my life here. And it took me a little while to get back on my feet. You know what I mean? Like, it was, I lived with a couple different people, and I didn't wait tables at the time. When I first moved back, I was somebody's assistant. Like I was like
personal assistant.
Not personal assistant, but sort of. I managed this guy's life. I was like a caretaker of a guy who had a traumatic brain injury.
Right.
And I did that from like 2006 to probably like 2009.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
And, you know, and then 2009 is when I worked on Sons for a minute, and did a couple episodes of that. And then I started working again at the 101, and I worked at the 101 for about 5 or 6 years. And then had some surgery. And then when I had my surgery, it was when I started doing art in like 2014, and, or maybe even earlier, about 2012 probably. But 2014, I had a surgery that took me off my feet and out of the 101 for a couple of months, and coming back in 2000 at the end of that year, 2015, I was like, I can't wait tables anymore. Like I think I'm done.
I remember that.
Yeah. And then I started doing some sober companioning and stuff like that, and just working on some movies and just banging around, not sure what I wanted to do. And this was actually at the time that I started really kind of, I mean, for the longest time in my life, as long as I can remember in my, you know, from when I got sober, was I always wanted to do a 1-person show.
Yeah.
But I never really had a context. I didn't know the context of which to talk about it. And I didn't really know what I wanted to talk about. And I wanted to talk about my observations of life, but I didn't know how to deliver it. So that was always, you know, and then in the mid 2000s, I was working with a friend of mine on kind of like delivering that. And at that time, it was like rooted in my travels. You know, what I learned, because one thing traveling overseas for me did was it opened my heart. It enabled me to become much more vulnerable. Well, I didn't, before I traveled, I was just so angry, like I said, at God and my father and my grandfather and just the world, you know what I mean, for this raw deal that I'd gotten. And when I traveled, I learned, I became grateful. It really showed me that, you know, what we have here, what I have in my life, you know, I really took for granted. You know what I mean? Like I was very much an ingrate before I went traveling. And when I went traveling, I was like, oh, this is, you know, because I did some immersion when I lived in Guatemala. I lived with 2 different families for a couple weeks each. It was like kind of an immersion program where.
How did you get involved in that?
Just if you look online, there's like different English schools that will teach you English, and you can choose to stay in a hostel and take English classes, or you can choose to stay with certain families, which then you pay them to rent a room. And then you're kind of immersed in the society a little bit more. And that's something that I was interested in doing. So, you know, the first place,
go ahead.
The first place I lived with was more like a boarder. Like I had my own room and you know, we had dinner with the family, but it was not quite as immersive as the second family that I lived with. The second family I lived with was in Quetzaltenango, and me and my friend, both with two of us, a friend that I had met traveling, we both lived with the same family, and I had this like room off of the like the middle, like the way, I can't even think of the name of it, but like the exterior, like the atrium, which was open. I had like a little tiny room, and it was I had a straw bed, and it was so uncomfortable. But I remember when I first got there, I was like, fucking man, I'm like, I'm paying these people to be in this small little room, and it's that, you know what I mean? Like, and then something clicked, man. I was like, dude, you wanted to have an experience. You wanted to have this immersion of experience, and these people are opening their home to you. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I'm lucky. I get to, this isn't, and I had this understanding, and that was, we were really kind of immersed in the family. Like, we could come and go, um, and they were like a little bit displaced by having us, but they needed the extra money, and they were a middle class family.
Oh, wow.
And they were groveling.
Wow.
And so it really kind of showed me a little bit more, you know, because both the parents, they had a tienda, and the father was also part of this vigilante, like a group of people that would walk the streets at night to make sure everything was safe.
Wow.
And the wife was a teacher. So, and they had like 3 or 4 kids, and they were all living in like, you know, 1 or 2 bedrooms, and, you know, they had a kitchen, and then they had the family room where some of the kids lived and slept. It was a very eye-opening experience. And then I traveled, like, so that was my first that was like my first month in Guatemala. I stayed in Antigua. The first home that I was at was in Antigua, which is kind of a colonial town. And so a lot of tourists and a lot of international people go through there. It's very beautiful and antique-y. And then the second place I lived was at Quetzaltenango, Catal, which is the capital. I'm pretty sure is the capital of Guatemala, which is a little bit more of an industrial town. So it's like you were in the city. It was more gritty, you know, a bit gray, but that was interesting, you know, and that, you know, so then I traveled throughout the countryside, and I went to different places in Guatemala for a couple months. Yeah, so you know, upon my return, my heart was open. Like, I was way more. I was more interested in my empathy. Like, I had more empathy for life, and maybe even probably others. You know, not just myself, but just like, oh wow, like, you know, this is lucky, this thing I have here. And
Yes.
And that started, like, that really changed me. I came back and I started. Was it then that I started? I didn't meditate when I went traveling, but I started because I started meditating after I got back. And that was another thing that was a real big change in my life. Was in 2000, right around 2007, I started meditating. And, you know,
Is that when you went to the Vipassana?
No, I didn't go to Vipassana until 5 or 6 years later.
Okay.
Someone told me about it, and I was like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. I'm never going to do that. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds, I mean, even today, it sounds like, oh my God, I'm quiet and meditating for 10 and a half hours a day. That sounds horrible and amazing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I don't know if I could, because now I don't even, I meditate, but I just came through a TM. I just learned TM. So I've been doing
Transcendental meditation.
Yeah, which is a completely different style than Vipassana.
How so? What's the difference?
Well, Vipassana is body scanning. It's very much a regimen where you sit straight, you sit, you know, you're sitting down, and you're just here. You're right here. You're right now. It's all about awareness and what's happening, and feeling, aware of your fingers, and, your eyes are closed, but you're not moving. Any kind of movement or any kind of itching, you just let it be. Everything just be. You're just observing. You're observing. You're observing. Whereas Transcendental meditation, TM, and also I guess Vedic, it was just very similar. You get a mantra and you echo this mantra in your mind, and that drops you into a different place. So, and that's about, and they want you to be relaxed. They don't want you to be sitting straight up. It's not about this rigidity. It's about kind of this relaxation of trying to like let the stress kind of burn out of you.
Can you lie down, or do you have to be sitting up?
No, they don't. They want you sitting up straight. They want you sitting up, but not like, they want you like your back to be
something behind it, so that your back doesn't get tired,
right.
and you can.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, it's interesting because like sitting straight up in like kind of a yoga or a meditative posture is way easy for me, but that's from doing Vipassana for a decade and a half. You know what I mean? I remember when I first started doing it, it was like, I was like, oh my God, my back hurts, but so rare that people are so used to sitting up straight.
Well, are those types of meditation different from the meditation you did when you first started? Yeah.
Oh yeah. When I first started, I started meditating. The style of meditation was, I mean, I would do it for like a couple minutes and just try to not think of anything, but just kind of like lose myself. And I would get lost in thought. And then one of my early teachers told me, just count up to 100. So up to 99 and then back down again. And don't worry about the number. Don't obsess about the figure of the number. Just count. Inhale 1, exhale 1. And every time you lose count, start over again. You will be interested. It's interesting because way more often than not, you're at like, especially when you first start, you'll be at like 7. And you'll be like, what was that? Like, what was that?
Because your mind's just like,
because your head just begins to just go, and be like, oh, you're like, God damn it, I knew I was, you're like, okay, I'm starting again, yeah. So that's where I started doing, I did that for a very long time. And just would, gradually did a little bit longer and a little bit longer and a little bit longer. Like Vipassana, if you do that style, stingently, or like the way that they want you to, that they prescribe you do it, is an hour in the morning and an hour at night. And I did that. I would do 2-a-days sometimes when I first finished a course for a couple months, but then it would just get really hard to do a second sit for an hour. But with Transcendental and with TM and Vedic, you do 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon. So it's more manageable. I mean, it's more, I mean, not that my life is super busy, like an hour I could have done, but just kind of gearing yourself up to sit for an hour. That's part of the reason I investigated a new way to meditate, was because Vipassana began to feel like a chore and a sentence. And that's not the way you want meditation to feel. I mean, I would some sits I would have, I would feel way more free at the sit, but sometimes I would be like, oh, all right, lashing myself to sit down in the morning. And, because I did that, I don't think I've missed a day of meditation one way or the other. I mean, maybe a handful of times in the past 15 years, 20 years.
It really makes sense astrologically speaking when you look at your astrological code, because like your moon in Taurus is the bull. So that sitting bull, that serene, the bull is a very serene creature when it's in a wide open space with plenty of space around it, the grass beneath it, the warm sun baking on its back. That's when it's very peaceful. But your moon's also, as we said before, in the 12th house, which is the unconscious. So when you are in that unconscious meditative state, but you are you're still and you're just calm. And then when you think of the TM of the
Mantra.
phrase, the mantra over and again, that might be clued in with your Gemini rising, which is ruled by Mercury, the planet of communication. So it gives something for your mind to kind of play with, even like, the Vipassana and just scanning through or counting the numbers as you did before. It gives your mind something to chew on because you have a very active mind. But
Mm-hmm.
because your moon is in Taurus in the 12th house, you find emotional serenity when you are in that peaceful, still, unconscious space.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, like
Yeah.
some people, like that meditation for them, like if you're an Aries moon, meditation for them is, riding a bicycle or going for a run. They have to be moving. So,
Right. That's how it
yeah.
started for me. I mean, when I first started, that's how meditation started. Like, not even didn't it, well, it started there through exercise. You know what I mean? Like jumping rope, going for long runs, and then I got to a place where, because I would get to a place physically where I was so exhausted, my
Mm-hmm.
mind could let go. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then it got to and then I started overlapping. I was actually sitting doing meditating, but also running extensively. I started doing marathons in the mid 2000s um, and jumping rope, and when I started boxing and stuff like that. That was right around that 2004, 2000 or 2005 and 2006. I started boxing. Um,
That makes sense
so.
too, just because of all the Aries frequency. Like I said, you and your dad were both born with Venus and Mercury in Aries, and Aries is the ram. So
Mhm.
Mercury is the mind, Venus is the senses. So your sensuality is stimulated by movement or conflict. Your mind is stimulated by movement or conflict. Your sense of coordination. Mercury also represents coordination. So so having that sort of activity, something to hit or move towards. Yes. Are you still boxing?
I do, but I don't do it as much as I used to. I'm like I've in my 50s. Things are the body's kind of shifted and
Yeah,
changed a bit. You know what I mean?
exactly.
Like it's it's been a lot of getting used to, and I'm still getting used to it. Just the way I'm tired more, or I mean, I've exercised my whole life, and through my 30s and 40s, I probably beat myself up with a lot of exercise
Push too
as a
hard.
means to
Yeah.
push too hard. As I I think I medicated with exercise.
That was your drug.
Because yeah, that was my drug. I was because I would get a lot of dopamine. I mean, there was a lot of years that I would exercise twice a day for like an hour, 2, 3 hours a day,
Hmm.
and as I've gotten older, I've not been able to sustain that kind of. I mean, I also don't have the same passion in me to sustain it.
Hmm.
I have the desire to kind of look a certain way, but um, my so another thing that happened over the last several years, and this, but over COVID, I found the through line of how to put together this one person show. A lot
Yes.
of stuff had shifted in my life. I'd been painting for a number of years at that point. Art had taken a uh, big role in my life.
Hmm.
I still was writing, and I was still pursuing acting, but I was also painting a lot, a visual artist, as you can see.
Yes.
Um, and I also got involved in a relationship over COVID that had ended abruptly and was very jarring. And once again, something else woke up in me that like, oh wow, okay, like this is what it's like to be in a partnership to a degree, or like I've realized that there is something. I always wanted something, a relationship, but I haven't had many relationships throughout my life, as
Hmm.
far as like intimate relationships with another person. And when that ended, I found myself and it wasn't even a super long relationship, but I was very heartbroken. And I, shattered expectations of like what I thought it was supposed to be or how it was going to wind down or end up. And I was I was out of town. I was traveling because during COVID, I was in Idaho for a couple months, and
Yeah.
then I was in
Oregon.
Portland for a couple months. Yeah. I was in Wyoming for a couple months as well. So I was traveling that kind of circle. I was going from, at this one time I went from LA to Portland to Idaho, and then Idaho to Wyoming. And I was on that kind of walkabout. It was like, this was 2021. And I was talking to my friend about like wanting to do this one person show. And I was doing a lot of writing over COVID in 2020 about my life and my childhood and like what I've been through or what I've seen or what I thought. And I was like, oh, like for some reason, art became the catalyst.
Yeah.
And I was like, how has art helped me? And it was well with writing, but how did art really help me kind of pull through this particular time in my life, but also all of my life? And what have I dumped on the page and what have I dumped onto the canvas? So then I wrote for a couple months, and I ended up putting together this one person show that I put together and performed. My friend and my writing partner, she helped produce it, but she directed it. Yeah. And I put it up my first show was in 2022. And then I put it up again last year.
Yeah.
And we're, looking at ways to kind of re-break the show and make it a little bit more interactive.
Yes.
And putting it up next year. But,
okay, good.
It's like, so
it's
interesting.
I saw the first run and, it was amazing. And I loved, it felt like it encompassed you, not only because it's your story, but because you wrote it, you're a writer, you're acting in it, you're an actor, and it's you as the artist, and you're doing art live at the show. And I really feel like the more interactive you can be with the audience, the more inclusive you can be with the audience, that's going to continue to elevate the show because of your North Node in Aquarius, so it's about, the thing that I loved about the show is you are so vulnerable, you're so open and about your story and the way that you just go through the process of the experience. Like I feel a lot of empathy for you, the character, but the person, but also I can relate, and so I think finding that connection between your story and how your story, even though it's not exactly like my story as a member of the audience, there are common threads that we can connect to, and the art is like what kind of brings us together.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this next incarnation is, a way to have me be more interactive with more members of the audience. Because the first show, which was named "I Want to Be Jeff Newman," because it's about. I mean, the second show was just retitled to make it broader, but I really
what was
loved
that title? The second
Blank
title?
Canvas.
Blank Canvas. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's where we all, my theory, the way I think about life is it's a blank canvas.
Yes.
And, we get to choose what we want to paint and who we want to be.
Yes.
When I'm in my most proactive form, because I can still fall into a victim and think that I don't have any control over what color it is, or, and it's the kind of thing we wrestle with throughout our lives. But how can I get more of the audience involved? And it's hard for me because I don't have a complete understanding of how I'm going to do that yet.
Yeah.
And we're going to, the idea is to workshop it like at a school.
Amazing. I don't necessarily have the answer for you there, but I feel like I have kind of reflective idea that can maybe stimulate your mind to to come up with the answer yourself. Like when you say life is like a blank canvas, like I totally relate to that phrase and that metaphor. I always have thought of life as like a wet piece of clay, where it's like when you're a child, you're like a wet piece of clay, just like a blank canvas, and people are touching the clay and they're putting indentations upon it, or just like a blank canvas, they're throwing paint again and they're painting the brush, and it's creating you. As you get to that adult phase, as you get older and older, like the canvas starts to fill up. And so it's like I tell everyone that I work with, the next time the planets and stars will be aligned in the way that they were aligned when you were born is over 25,000 years from the date, time, and place of your birth. So
Wow.
you are a divine, unique miracle. Just like every work of art is a little bit unique. It's unlike anything else. But at the same time, we're all born under the same planets and stars as everyone else. So that means that everyone that you come into contact with in some way, shape, or form is reflecting you, and you are reflecting them. Just like your father, Taurus sun, you're a Taurus sun, your father, a Mercury retrograde in Aries, you, a Mercury retrograde in Aries, you, a Venus in Aries, your father, a Venus in Aries. You're reflecting each other. Are your codes exactly the same? No, but there is that reflection. So as a new stroke of paint comes on the canvas, it's going to attract a different reflection. If the canvas is all blue, it's going to attract other canvases that are blue, because that blue canvas looks like that blue canvas. But then you add some purple, and that blue canvas doesn't fit as much in with the blue and purple canvas. Now you got some purple canvases moving, and then you put some green on there. And so as we go through life and we evolve and we have these different experiences, we change. And so the people around us, they either change or they leave and new people come in that are more reflective of who we are. And so maybe there's something there with that metaphor with the blank canvas is how we, as we have these different experiences, we attract people that have similar experiences. Like it's no question for me, like why we're connected, because we have so many similarities, like in our stories. And so that's why we are drawn together. But as you evolve, as I evolve, we're going to have to evolve together, or we're going to move further and further apart. But it creates space for other people to come in that are a more accurate reflection of who we are. And that's sort of the journey of life.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see the next incarnation of the one man
excited
show
too, but it's scary.
Is that your main focus right now of what you're working on?
Well, that and this other show this show that I wrote with my writing partner.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wrote this show, and that's kind of, I'm splitting time, but splitting time between those two things, and then there's this other possible job that takes me to Hawaii for 2 months, which is just about physical labor and making money.
What island?
Oahu.
Okay.
The big island.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would just be, my friend is he helps repurpose like naval vessels.
Okay.
So, or big ships. So there's a ship in dry dock that we would be working on, just kind of like checking and fixing. I don't even know exactly what I'd be doing, but it'd be manual labor.
Yeah.
So I'm in kind of limbo. I should find out about that in the next couple of days.
Okay.
And if that happens, then I'm going to be off and doing that. That'll be my focus for a month or two. And then it'll be good. I mean, I'm a little nervous about how much I'll be working and how hard I'll be working, but it'll be fine. Just every day. And
you'll make some money and then come back and refocus on the different projects. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Those two projects. Yeah, exactly.
So what would you like to leave our audience with in terms of like your perspective on life, and any words of wisdom or insight you would like to share? I mean, you've shared a lot already, but anything kind of come to mind?
Well, I mean, that is similar to what my show, the show is, I don't know if is kind of like how art has helped me come to terms with my life,
Mm-hmm.
and how working out the issues I've had through art, and I've developed and created something. I think that we are all, I think each of us, like you had just mentioned, are each uniquely qualified to create something. It doesn't matter if you're an accountant. It doesn't matter if you're a custodial engineer. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Or you're an artist, or you're a sculptor, or a painter, or a singer. What are you creating? Like if you're a mother, you know what I mean? Like you're helping create a life. If you're an accountant, you're creating and you're dealing with numbers. Like everything we can look at in a with a naive lens and find purpose there.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody and purpose and inspiration, because that's what I most often am come back to. It's like, well, what's my purpose and what's my inspiration? What's my purpose? What's my inspiration? And I think that can change every day, and then you can have an overarching idea. Like I find projects. You know what I mean? Like whether it's the one person show or a different show or a play that I'm working on. I think we have the power of choice, which is an immense power. And it's very easy for me to lose sight of that and get lost in a circumstance. And I think that's what I find unique about, the work that you do is it can help motivate someone out of this circumstantial victimhood. It's like, oh, that's right. Like I am born with this aptitude or talent or whatever. Like we all have something.
Yes.
We all have something that makes us unique. I think we're all the same and we're very different.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we embrace those? How do we embrace that skill set?
Yes.
So what I would just hope people see that, like we're not just driftwood.
Mm-hmm.
you know
Yes.
um
You matter.
yeah,
You have a gift that you are here to cultivate. And it's not necessarily one gift. It could be multiple gifts, but it can
right,
change from day to day, like you're saying,
exactly.
but what are you contributing to society, to the people that are around you in your life, and
Your community.
your community.
Yeah.
And this is, you're speaking to your North Node, your soul's purpose, which, as we said before, is in Aquarius, which is symbolized by the water bear. And the water bear was that person that lived a long, long time ago in a village so primitive that everyone in the village went down to the stream each and every day and drank water at the stream like an animal. And
Mm-hmm.
until one night, the water bear, said, like, I have an idea sitting around the campfire. I'm going to figure out how to bring water from the stream to the village. And all the other villagers were like, huh, this person's crazy. But the water bear was undeterred by their jeers and sneers and said, I'm going to figure this out anyway, and went to work and created a jug that benefited not only themselves, but the whole village. And it created that sense of independence for the village, because not everybody had to go down to the stream each and every day. You could just, a couple people could do it, bring back the water, and it created more independence of time. So, I think you're onto something, and just remembering that thought that we all have something unique to offer the community, the group, the club, whatever organization you're a part of, whoever's around you. What are you contributing? What are you bringing that's unique? And that's the focus.
Yeah. I think it's very easy to get in this, at least in Western culture, caught up in the money and the property and the prestige. And gratefully, I've met a lot of people with a lot of things, and I've met some people with very little things, and they all struggle,
Yep.
even the people with a lot of things.
Exactly.
And the struggle, what makes it more, like there's no there. You know what I mean? Like there's no there. It's all an illusion. It's just this moment right now. And the people that are surrounding you in this moment and those relationships that we cultivate, it seems so silly and so minute, and maybe it doesn't. It just seems so simple. But that's what, I think, obviously I've not been beyond this particular time, but that's what this means. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like the relationships that we have, I can't take what's in my pocket with me.
Yes.
But I think my consciousness maintains and keeps the relationships, the structure, the beauty of that is something that I can take with me.
Yes. It's like the energetic imprint that you have left on my soul cannot be duplicated by anyone else. And so it's very special. It's something
like the money that somebody had that you may have known, you can't take that with you. But if that person passes away, that imprint of that person on you.
Yes, exactly.
Those memories, those are things that we can take with us, and we can also continue to live.
Yes.
So it's, sometimes I think Western culture has it upside down. I think we do have it upside down.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, rather than empowering each other and empowering, your brethren to have these moments, it's always about like, well, what's the next moment? Oh, I have to have this going to be better over there. So better if once I get this thing over here, it's going to be, I'll be able to, it's like, no, just maybe just enjoy the walk to the next place with whomever you're with.
Absolutely. Brilliant, Jeff Newman. Thank you so much. Where can people find you?
You can find me at, I'm on Instagram, is probably my most active source of media, but all across most medias, I'm NuISMS, NuISMS. And that's also NuISMS.com. So Facebook, Instagram. I do have a TikTok that I post to sometimes, art. I basically post my art, but if you want to get in touch with me and talk to me about any of that stuff or anything I talked about here, those are, you can go to .com or hit me up on Instagram.
Or if you want to buy an art piece, that's at the website. We'll put all the links in the show notes, but it's good for you to say them too if anyone's listening and they're not looking at the show notes. So.
Right, exactly, yeah. NuISMS. It's just how it sounds.
Yes.
NuISMS.
And what is the NuISMS?
It stands for
SMS.
Yeah.
What does that represent?
Well, an ism is an ideology or a theory.
Mm-hmm.
And Newman is, my last name is Newman. So NuISMS is
the ideology of Jeff Newman.
Of me.
Yeah.
It started someplace else. It started with just reinventing whatever we know.
Yes.
Because I think that we as a culture need to, I think that's where new ideas come from. Yes, it's very rare to have a spontaneously new idea. We're inundated with, even more so now than when you and I were children, with information all the time. Mm-hmm. So how do we break this information down and come up with a new thing? So that's kind of the ism, and the NuISM is kind of that, and my philosophy of life. So
love that. Well, you are a brilliant, beautiful soul, a bright, shining light, Mr. Newman. I am so honored and grateful to have had this conversation with you and to have had you here on the weekly transit. So thank you so much for everything you shared.
It's my pleasure and my honor, man. It's always an honor to cut it up with you.
Thank you for listening to the Weekly Transit. Interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tejerian. Music written by Ben Leinbach from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog Lyman. If you're interested in being a guest on the Weekly Transit, you can email me at scott@theweeklytransit.com.